Health and safety is a priority, not only in and around the Cranebank site, but also on the simulators themselves. So we're now going to move on to look at how to access the simulator system and how to make it work for you efficiently, but more importantly, safely. To begin with, mobile phones have been known to set off the fire alarms, so as on an aircraft, they should be switched off before boarding the simulator. Now, simulator motion won't start with the drawbridge down. On some simulators, raising the drawbridge is controlled by a button on the outside of the cab. On other simulators, the drawbridge is automatically raised once the motion button is pressed inside. But whichever simulator you're using, you'll find all the information you need in the quick reference manual, or indeed the instructor's manual.
They are extremely detailed and contain everything you could need for building training details. A shorter version is contained in the quick reference manual, which will normally provide sufficient information for most activities.
But before you can start a detail, you'll first have to log on the computer terminal you'll find outside every simulator. It's essentially the master switch to the entire system. You use it at the beginning and the end of every detail. It's menu driven and therefore extremely logical to use.
You'll find exact instructions in the quick reference manual. To log on, you will need to find the menu page. Since the last user may have left the terminal at a data entry page, the quick reference manual tells you how to get back to the menu. This may be via the simulator notices, records of anything that has changed about the simulator over the past few days. Having arrived at the menu, move the cursor to Log and then to Write and hit the return key. Normally, the computer will be expecting you. You may find your company name already on the screen. Fill in the boxes with the required information for starting your detail, including the type of training. And with the cursor on Yes, press Return.
Once you've logged on, the simulator, which like all at Cranebank are generic in the way they're set up, is ready to receive you.
You'll find its operation very user-friendly, but a look at the basics will help first-time users move quickly through the start of their detail and get straight down to business. It is the instructor's responsibility to comply with the health and safety regulations that everyone involved in the detail has been briefed on the simulator emergency procedures before starting the lesson.
Before we sit down and
At the back of every simulator is an emergency procedures leaflet.
The fire alarms are the same as they are throughout the rest of the building, except to say that for both the intermittent and the continuous, the motion will settle and we will exit the simulator through this door here. For an intermittent warning, we'll return to either the coffee bar or the briefing room, unless the warning becomes continuous, and should it become continuous, we'll evacuate the building by the nearest suitable exit. The primary exit will be back through the door here, up the staircase and through the mezzanine level door, and for the secondary exit, if the motion for some reason and drawbridge doesn't allow the drawbridge to settle, be out through this door here, turn left and down the rigid ladder. If that's not possible because the motion is settled in a peculiar attitude, there is also a rope ladder available out to the right hand side through this doorway here. All that remains for me to cover really is the fire extinguisher down on the right hand side of the bulkhead and the emergency stop buttons and switches. The instructor has a stop button above the upper touch screen, and at the rear of the center console there's two switches that will also isolate the motion and the rest of the systems.
If you were to have an emergency, the way you needed assistance either from engineering or from the emergency services, how do you call them?
There's a telephone at the rear of the instructor's console, and the number for the first aid facilities is on the wall, and the number for maintenance, which is manned 24 hours a day, 22057, is on the safety instructions. So unless there's any other questions, if you'd like to take your seats.
Now, I've seen how much a simulator can buck around, so I don't need to be told that the first thing you do when you take your seat is strap yourself into one of these. Now, from an instructor's point of view, how do the simulators vary from each other?
Well, at Cranebank we have two types of instructor stations, but generally most will be pretty much the same as you see before you here. So you have two touch screens, an upper touch screen and a lower touch screen, and programmable touch panels, and an instructor's portable control unit.
And why is that portable?
This allows me to interface with the computer and at the same time be situated between the crew.
So when you first come into the cockpit, exactly how would you find this?
The same as you see before you here, both screens will be turned down, and I need to adjust the brightness levels accordingly. And the visual page may have the visual indicating blank. And the light on the IPCU will be flashing for the total freeze, and that'll need to be deselected as I've done here, and that'll allow the crew then to commence their pre-flight check. And then if we're commencing a lesson plan detail, on the lower screen, and activate it using the instructor's portable control unit.
British Airways fleet has its own series of lesson plans, which have been programmed and stored in advance, so the instructor doesn't need to input the lesson details to the computer directly. For example, airfield and other pre-selections are already built in. British Airways lesson plans are formatted as action lines. They show the action in progress and at least the next two actions ahead.
If a customer wants to follow his own plan, it can be arranged, providing it was agreed at the contractual stage. But for most, a BA lesson plan is a tried and tested formula. Now, what happens if you're not going to follow a lesson plan? How do you exactly program the computer?
For the initial setup, you need to use the touchscreens and the PTPs. In this case, I've selected Area Map on the upper screen and the main menu on the lower screen. And the logic for the PTPs is very straightforward. The right-hand column indicates the pages available, and the highlighted icon shows the page that's displayed. For example, early in the detail, the crew will want external power. That's accomplished by selecting Utils Ground on the page and Ground Power, which once illuminated indicates that power is now available.
And what would you do next?
I return to the lower screen, and starting from the main menu, I start in the top right from position set, and as I complete each page of data, I move through next setup, changing data as required until eventually I end up at the main menu.
So starting from the beginning, how do we establish where we're flying from and where we want to fly to?
Using the position set page. This page not only adjusts the airfield from the start of a detail and later on for the destination if it's required to be changed, but also acts as a reference point for all repositions and a reference point additionally for all the ground station data.
So let's say we want to fly from Gatwick to Paris. How would you do that?
At the moment the computer has defaulted to Heathrow. So by selecting a variable, it calls up an alphanumeric touchpad, and that's the same for any of the variables on the touchpad screen. And in this particular case you wanted to go from London Gatwick, so I'll select the 3-letter code for London Gatwick, insert it into the computer, and after a few seconds the system then activates through to Gatwick. And once we're airborne we can change it, in our case, to Paris Charles de Gaulle.
So we now know which route we're taking, but how do we establish the environmental conditions?
By stepping through next setup, I come to the airfield set page, and on this page it allows me to change any of the environmental conditions.
Presumably you go through a similar process to set up the condition of the aircraft itself.
Indeed, if I continue through next setup, I'll come after a few seconds to aircraft set. And on this page I can change the fuel load, distribution, payload, and if I so desire, the centre of gravity.
So is everything complete now? We're ready to go?
Not quite. Because we've left the simulator static for a few minutes, you'll notice the visual's gone blank. So if I return to the visual PTP page and removing the blank icon, checking that the freezers are removed from the hand control unit, the simulator is now available for training.
Once the detail started, how much control do you have?
At any stage of the detail, you can return to the main menu and access any of the pages to change data as and when you require.
Now I imagine one of the great benefits of simulator training is to deal with aircraft emergencies. How would you program them?
There is a full suite of emergencies from the main menu on the left-hand side, but in most cases, most of the major emergencies are available on the PTP page.
Well, the crew look as if they could handle anything. What should we throw at them?
Let me give them a number 2 engine fire.
Engine fire.
Engine fire checklist for number 2 engine.
Thrust lever.
Confirmed.
Number 2 fuel control switch.
Confirmed.
Number 2 engine fire wall switch.
Confirmed. When you've completed with the emergency, I select the highlighted icon which will remove that fault. Alternatively, I can press total reset and that'll clear all faults on the simulator.
Well, they handled that well. What else can we give them?
Why not give them wind shear on the latter stages of the approach? And that's accessible from the main menu on Special Effects page. And select a microburst on. Reposition the aircraft to 5 miles and activate the emergency.
Wind shear go around.
Descending 500 feet. Descending 450 feet.
Wind shear, wind shear, wind shear.
Climbing 450 feet.
If you were to decide to take a break in the middle of a detail, how would you make sure that you came back to exactly where you left it?
Using the hand controller, if I press total freeze, the simulator freezes static, and we can then exit by pressing the off motion. And once it's disengaged, we can unstrap safely and go for a coffee break. And when we return, engage the motion, we can then take off from exactly where we left.
Well, that seems a good cue for us to take a break.
If you've completed the detail, you log off. As before, you choose Log and Write from the menu page. Any snags can be recorded by choosing Snags and pressing Return. To end the detail, the End Detail page asks various questions, such as time used and time lost.
One important question the SimNet terminal will ask is about customer satisfaction. Your response will greatly help British Airways to improve their service to you and to all future users of the British Airways Training Centre here at Cranebank.
Airlines from all over the world who are increasingly sending their flight and cabin crews to take advantage of British Airways' unrivaled expertise in flight training and simulation.